The morning sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the grand estate, painting golden streaks across the marble floor. Ava stood by the nursery window, gently cradling her growing belly, a soft smile playing on her lips. Her hands instinctively rubbed the curve of her stomach, as if reassuring the life within that everything in the world was perfect. And to Ava, it truly felt like it was. She had everything she had ever dreamed of, a loving husband, a beautiful home nestled on the outskirts of the city, and the promise of a future that sparkled with warmth and hope. Her days were filled with gentle routines, prenatal yoga in the garden, browsing for baby names, and flipping through color palettes for the nursery walls. Ethan, her husband, was a respected millionaire known for his charm, business acumen, and dazzling smile that had won Ava's heart 5 years earlier. He often came home late from meetings but always greeted her with a soft kiss on the forehead and asked about her day. He would smile when she told him about the baby's kicks or when she left him voice notes of nursery rhyme tunes she had practiced on the piano. To Ava, their life was a fairy tale, built on trust, love, and shared dreams. She often said to friends, "I'm living a life I never thought possible." But behind the carefully polished smile Ethan wore, and the warmth in his voice was a secret so venomous it would shatter her world. Because while Ava lovingly planned their child's future, Ethan was spending late nights with another woman, Veronica. She was everything Ava wasn't, bold, cold, and ruthless in pursuit of what she wanted. And what she wanted was Ethan, entirely and permanently. Veronica had inserted herself into Ethan's life like a poison, slowly, silently. She was the head of a PR firm Ethan had recently partnered with, and what started as flirtation in boardrooms quickly spiraled into secret weekend getaways and whispered lies. Ethan told himself he could manage both lives. Ava didn't need to know. She was safe, fragile, pure, and Veronica was chaos and excitement. But Ava, blissfully unaware, continued painting the nursery pale green that day, humming to herself, whispering promises to the baby inside her. In her heart, everything was whole. What she didn't know was that her perfect life was already slipping through her fingers. Veronica Hart was the kind of woman who could stop conversations by simply entering a room. Her heels clicked with authority, her red lips curved with confidence, and her eyes, sharp, calculating, never missed a detail. She had built her image with precision, designer clothes tailored to perfection, a voice that oozed control, and a presence that made people lean in, eager to please. But behind the glamour and charm, Veronica was ruthless. She wasn't interested in love, not really. She was interested in power, in legacy, and in building her empire, no matter who she had to destroy to get there. And Ethan Monroe, the millionaire entrepreneur with a public image squeaky clean and a wallet lined in gold, was her perfect mark. It had started as a professional relationship. Veronica's PR firm took over one of Ethan's tech campaigns. She studied him like a case file, his weaknesses, his needs, his ego. Ethan was successful, yes, but he was tired. Ava, the sweet pregnant wife who wore floral dresses and baked muffins for meetings, didn't excite him anymore. She reminded him of obligation, of safety. Veronica, on the other hand, was fire. She made him feel young, dangerous, untouchable. And she knew exactly how to use that. "I don't get it," she would whisper into Ethan's ear as they lay tangled in high thread count sheets at a luxury hotel. "You're building empires during the day and going home to, what? Diaper talk and bedtime stories? You're meant for more, Ethan." Her words slithered around his insecurities, tightening like a noose. She fed him poisoned praise, telling him he deserved someone who matched his ambition, someone who wouldn't dull his spark with baby chatter and nursery walls. Ethan, once principled and thoughtful, found himself believing her. Ava began to feel like a weight around his neck. He still cared for her in a distant, guilty sort of way, but he couldn't deny the excitement Veronica brought. She lit a fire in him, one that burned reason, morality, and loyalty all at once. As weeks turned into months, Veronica stopped playing the mistress in the shadows. She wanted more, his full attention, his fortune, and most of all, his name. "You need to decide, Ethan," she said one night, slipping on her diamond-studded earrings in front of the hotel mirror. "Her or me? The baby or your future? I won't wait forever." Ethan said nothing that night, just stared into the mirror, torn between the life he had built and the one Veronica was promising him. But silence was all the answer she needed. Veronica smiled. She knew she was winning. Slowly, steadily, she was tightening her grip on him, and he was letting her. Ava, growing rounder and more radiant by the day, had no idea that her husband was slipping deeper into another woman's world, one that didn't have space for a wife, or a child. At first, Ava brushed it off as stress. Ethan was running multiple businesses, constantly attending meetings, and taking late-night calls that bled into the early hours. She told herself that it was temporary, that once the baby came, things would calm down. But deep inside, a quiet ache had begun to settle. It started small, missed calls, unanswered texts. Then came the missed doctor appointments. The first time, Ethan had promised he would be there for the sonogram. Ava waited in the clinic lobby, her hands resting nervously on her belly, eyes glued to the door. He never showed. He texted 2 hours later, got caught up in a meeting. Hope it went well. No apology. No excitement. Just cold indifference wrapped in business speak. After that, everything seemed to shift. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her was gone. The gentle kisses on her forehead, the hands on her belly, the nightly talks about baby names, disappeared like smoke. At dinner, he stared at his phone more than her face. He slept on the far edge of the bed, if he came home at all. And when she asked if he was okay, he'd sigh and say, "I'm just tired. Stop overthinking everything, Ava." But it wasn't in her head. She could feel the space between them widening like a chasm. What she didn't know was that Veronica was behind every cold glance and dismissive response. She had been whispering poison into Ethan's ear for weeks. "She's emotionally draining you," she'd say. "Pregnancy is just an excuse to control your life. Don't let her trap you." Every time Ethan began to feel guilt, Veronica was there to douse it in disdain. Slowly, she was teaching him how to disconnect. Ethan started staying out later and offering vague excuses. He grew impatient with Ava's questions, rolling his eyes when she asked about their future. When she showed him the tiny baby clothes she'd bought, hoping to spark joy, he barely looked at them. "It's just clothes, Ava," he said flatly before returning to his laptop. Ava tried harder. She cooked his favorite meals, left love notes in his briefcase, even dressed up and planned a movie night. But he canceled, said he had a work dinner. He came home past midnight, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his usual scent. By now, Ava's confusion had turned into quiet heartbreak. Her hands still cradled her belly protectively, but her heart was heavy. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with everything, was slipping away from her one cold silence at a time. She didn't know what she had done wrong. She only knew that the love that once wrapped around her like a blanket was now a ghost, faint, cold, and drifting further from reach each day. Ava woke up that morning with a flutter of excitement in her chest. It was her birthday, her first one while carrying their child. She believed in small joys, and birthdays had always held a special place in her heart. She imagined Ethan bringing her breakfast in bed, maybe a simple bouquet, maybe a surprise dinner. They hadn't been connecting lately, but she hoped, deep down, that today would be different. She clung to the belief that maybe he just needed a reason to remember how much he loved her. She spent hours getting ready, brushing out her curls, slipping into a soft peach dress that still hugged her baby bump beautifully. She dabbed perfume on her wrists, the same one Ethan used to say reminded him of spring. By evening, the candles were lit, her favorite cake sat waiting on the counter, and her heart beat faster with every sound she thought might be the front door. But the clock kept ticking. No Ethan. No flowers. No calls. She finally texted, "Will you be home soon?" His reply came 10 minutes later. "Can't make it tonight. Important meeting out of town. Sorry." She stared at the screen, her eyes stinging. He didn't even say happy birthday. Didn't even ask how she was feeling. Ava sat down slowly, a slice of untouched cake on her plate, the flickering candle now nothing but melting wax. Later that night, unable to sleep, she scrolled through social media absent-mindedly, hoping for some distraction. That's when she saw it. On Veronica's story. Just a few seconds long, but unmistakable, a wine glass clinking with another hand across a candle-lit table. The man's cufflink flashed in the candlelight. Ava recognized it. It was Ethan's. The caption read, "Where I meant to be tonight." The room spun. Ava's breath caught. She knew. There was no meeting. He wasn't out of town for business. He was with her. On her birthday. She waited for him that night, sitting by the window like a ghost. When Ethan finally returned past midnight, smelling of wine and unfamiliar perfume, she didn't scream. She simply asked, "Where were you?" He looked annoyed. "I told you. Business dinner." "I saw Veronica's story," she whispered. "Don't lie to me." His face hardened. "You're being paranoid again, Ava. This pregnancy is messing with your head. You've got to stop imagining things." "I know what I saw," she said, her voice trembling. He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Ava. This is why I stay away. You're too emotional, too exhausting." That word, exhausting, hit her like a slap. Ava stood there, the nightgown stretching gently over her belly, feeling a pain far deeper than betrayal. Ethan didn't even deny it. He made her feel crazy instead. Gaslit her until her heartbreak was framed as hysteria. He walked away and went to bed. She stood alone in the kitchen, her birthday cake still on the counter, untouched and melting under the kitchen lights, just like the last remnants of her hope. Veronica sat by the edge of the infinity pool at the private villa Ethan had rented for them, her sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose, cocktail in hand, rage simmering just beneath the surface of her flawless smile. Ethan had just left for an overseas business trip, and although she should have felt thrilled to finally have him all to herself without the constant interruption of that pathetic little housewife, she didn't. In fact, every time Ethan kissed her, every time he made a promise, there was always a hesitation in his eyes, a shadow of Ava that refused to fade. Ava. Always Ava. The pregnant wife still living in Ethan's mansion, still carrying his child, still clinging to a marriage that Veronica had long since destroyed in everything but name. Veronica had waited long enough. She had played the game, played the part of the seductive mistress, whispered all the right words to poison Ethan's mind against his wife. But it wasn't enough. Ava still existed. Still stood as a symbol of the life Veronica could never fully claim as her own. That night, as she scrolled through Ava's recent baby shower photos filled with warmth, friends, and a kind of peace Veronica couldn't understand, something inside her snapped. She had had enough. It was time to erase Ava completely. She made the first call that night. The man who answered didn't ask many questions. That's how Veronica liked to operate. Clean, quiet, and without fuss. She told him exactly what she needed, a woman removed from a property. "She's delusional," she said smoothly. "She used to be with my fiancé. She won't leave us alone. She's unstable, dangerous, and pregnant with a child she's using to manipulate him. We've tried everything. This is the only way to make her stop." The man chuckled. "What do you want done?" "I want her gone. Disappear her. But make it look natural. An accident. No mess." He agreed, the price negotiated without hesitation. Veronica wired the deposit before the call ended. Over the next 2 days, she carefully coordinated everything. She knew Ethan wouldn't be back for at least a week. Ava would be alone in the mansion. There were no family members close by. No friends who visited without notice. She even called the housekeeper and gave her a paid week off. One by one, Veronica removed the pieces of Ava's protection, until she stood vulnerable and exposed. On the day the plan was set in motion, Veronica arrived at Ethan's home unannounced, claiming she needed to pick up a file for one of his upcoming meetings. She greeted Ava with a fake smile, even handed her a small bouquet. "No hard feelings," she said, oozing false sweetness. Ava, unsure but too polite to refuse, let her inside. That evening, 2 men broke through the back entrance Veronica had conveniently left unlocked. They were large, silent, and efficient. They found Ava in her bedroom, unaware, humming to her unborn child as she folded laundry. When she saw them, she screamed. They grabbed her, muffled her cries, and dragged her out the back door. Veronica stood hidden behind a tree at the edge of the property, watching without flinching. Her lips curled into a smile as Ava was shoved into the back of a garbage truck parked just beyond the hedges. It roared to life, the sound drowning out any final pleas. Veronica turned away before it drove off, pulling out her phone. She texted Ethan, "Thinking of you tonight. Hope that meeting goes well. Miss you already." And with that, she walked away, heels clicking on stone, satisfied that her competition had finally been removed, permanently. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of stillness that made every creak and whisper sound louder than it should. Ava lay curled on her side in bed, one hand gently resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching the soft corner of a baby blanket she had sewn herself. Her eyes fluttered open briefly as she felt another small kick from within, a comforting reminder that, even in her loneliness, she wasn't truly alone. She whispered softly, "It's just you and me, little one," before slowly drifting back into a fragile sleep. But that peace was brutally shattered minutes later. The back door creaked open with eerie precision, hinges barely groaning under the practiced hands of the intruders. Two large figures stepped into the house, dressed in black from head to toe, their movements silent and purposeful. They navigated through the mansion like ghosts, guided by the layout Veronica had provided. One checked his watch. 2:47 a.m. The house was dark. Ava was alone, just as planned. Upstairs, Ava stirred slightly as the floorboards creaked outside her bedroom. Her eyes opened slowly, instinctively sensing something off. Before she could sit up or call out, her bedroom door burst open. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth as the second man lunged toward her, pinning her to the bed. She kicked, struggled, tried to scream, but it was muffled into nothing. Terror overtook her. "Please," she sobbed beneath the hand, her voice cracked and breathless. "I'm pregnant. Please don't hurt my baby." One of the men glanced at the other. "She's awake. Move fast." They bound her wrists and ankles with heavy duct tape and wrapped a cloth tightly around her mouth. The entire room, once filled with warmth and lullabies, now felt like a tomb. Ava's heart pounded, her body shaking with fear. She tried to fight, but every movement sent sharp pain through her side. Her baby shifted within her, as if sensing the danger too. Outside, hidden beneath the trees, Veronica watched. She stood beneath the shadows in a long black coat, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes cold and unblinking. She didn't flinch as Ava was dragged down the stairs, her muffled cries echoing through the silent night. Veronica's jaw clenched at every sound, but not from guilt. From anticipation. This was it. The end of the problem. The beginning of her perfect life. The garbage truck was parked just outside the garden fence, engine humming low. One of the men climbed in, pulled down the side panel, and motioned for the other to lift Ava up. Her body twisted violently as she tried to break free, her eyes wide with silent screams. Then, without hesitation, they shoved her into the back of the truck. She hit the metal floor with a dull thud, landing between bags of trash and sharp, rusted debris. The smell was unbearable. Her body ached in places she didn't understand. She tried to scream, but her mouth was sealed. She tried to move, but the tape held tight. The doors slammed shut behind her. Veronica turned away before the truck pulled off, the corners of her lips lifting into the faintest smirk. It was done. The truck drove slowly through the darkened streets, the driver humming mindlessly. The second man sat beside him, silent, checking his watch. "We'll dump her at the landfill," he said. "No one will ever know." But in the back, something felt wrong to the younger man. He had seen a lot in his line of work, threats, rough removals, intimidation jobs, but this felt different. He had seen Ava's eyes. The fear in them. The way she had protected her stomach, her unborn child, like it was the only thing she had left. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't violent. She was pregnant. Helpless. She didn't look crazy to me, he muttered. The driver shrugged. Doesn't matter. We're just paid to drop the trash. But this ain't trash, the younger one whispered under his breath. He looked out the window, fingers twitching on his thigh, debating something. He didn't say another word, but in his gut, a seed of doubt had been planted. One that wouldn't go away. Meanwhile, inside the cold, filthy belly of the truck, Ava lay crumpled and trembling, praying harder than she ever had in her life. For her child. For a miracle. For someone to see her before it was too late. Ethan stepped off the private jet with the ease of a man used to power, his phone already pressed to his ear as he strode toward his waiting car. His meetings in Dubai had gone better than expected. The merger was moving forward, investors were happy, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could finally breathe. Maybe he'd even go home, take Ava out for lunch, and try to make things right. The guilt that had been gnawing at the back of his mind had grown louder lately. He couldn't ignore the haunting look in her eyes the last time he saw her. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just stopped looking at him the way she used to. When he arrived home, the silence felt off. The house was too quiet, too still. He called her name once. No answer. He moved from room to room. The kitchen was untouched. No breakfast dishes. The bedroom was neatly made. No sign of her shoes near the door. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen cracked, as if it had been dropped in a hurry. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He called her phone first, instinctively, then the housekeeper. No one knew where she was. He called 3 of her friends. None of them had heard from her in over a day. His heart started to race. Then he remembered the housekeeper mentioning earlier in the week that Ava had been feeling faint. Could she have gone to the hospital? Alone? He tried every nearby clinic. No one had admitted her. Panic, unfamiliar and sharp, began to claw its way through his chest. That's when Veronica walked in. She strolled through the front door with the calmness of a woman who had nothing to hide, dropping her designer handbag on the table like she owned the place. "You're back early," she said casually, her tone light, her red nails gleaming as she reached for a glass of water. "Where is Ava?" Ethan asked, his voice cold. Veronica blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "She's gone. No one has seen her since yesterday." Veronica shrugged. "Maybe she needed space. You said she's been emotional." Something about her tone, careless, dry, made something click in Ethan's mind. He stared at her hard, longer than he ever had. And for the first time, he noticed something behind her eyes. Something sharp. Dangerous. Before he could speak, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Ibrahim, the neighbor from 2 doors down. An older man, kind-hearted and a bit nosy. He looked rattled, holding up a USB stick in his hand. I think you should see this," he said. Ethan took it without a word and led him to his study. When he plugged the stick into the laptop, his world stopped spinning. The footage played in muted silence. Black and white night vision. A shadowy figure, Ava, being dragged from the back of the house by 2 masked men. Her body limp, her mouth clearly covered. Her pregnant belly obvious even in the grainy footage. The timestamp was just after 3 a.m. And then the truck came into view. A garbage truck. It backed up toward the hedges. The men opened the back panel. One climbed in. Then they tossed her in. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. He couldn't look away. Couldn't even blink. The sound of his heartbeat pounded in his ears. He turned slowly to Veronica, who was now standing near the doorway, her eyes wide, jaw clenched, lips twitching as if trying to form a lie but finding none. "You did this," he said, voice low and trembling. You touched my wife." "She was in the way," Veronica whispered, no longer pretending. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't yell. He moved past her like she wasn't even there, grabbing his keys, phone, and laptop. Because Ava wasn't just missing anymore. She was in danger. And she needed him now more than ever. Ethan's fingers flew across his phone screen, dialing with a kind of desperation he hadn't felt since his father died. As the garbage truck's haunting image replayed in his mind, his voice cracked with urgency. He wasn't a man easily shaken, not in courtrooms, not in hostile boardrooms, but this was different. This was Ava, his wife, the mother of his unborn child. And someone had tried to erase her like trash. He called the city's sanitation department first. "This is Ethan Monroe. I need access to your garbage truck routes. Immediately. Pull every truck that ran near Sycamore Heights between 3 and 4 a.m. The man on the other end hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "You can. And you will. Or I'll have your department shut down by the end of the week. Get me the routes. Now." While the department scrambled, Ethan barked orders into a separate line to his head of security. "I need all our surveillance assets focused on this. Every license plate scanned near the house last night, every truck registered in the area. Pull footage from the city's traffic cams. Get my chopper on standby, and track that truck." His voice was steel, but inside, a storm raged. Guilt clawed at him. For ignoring her. For believing Veronica. For letting himself drift so far that Ava had become a stranger in his own home. And now, the woman he had once promised to protect was somewhere out there, bleeding, bound, and possibly dying inside a truck meant for garbage. Miles away, inside the metal belly of the truck, Ava drifted in and out of consciousness. The stench of rotting food, chemicals, and damp refuse choked her lungs. Her body ached with every bump the truck hit. Sharp pain stabbed at her side, maybe broken ribs, maybe something worse, but it was the baby she feared for most. She could barely breathe. Her hands were numb, still bound. The tape over her mouth had loosened from her sweat, but she didn't have the strength to scream. Her body jerked violently as the truck hit a pothole, and she let out a soft, broken cry. She didn't know if it was night or day. She didn't know if anyone even realized she was missing. But she prayed. Not for herself, she had long stopped hoping for miracles, but for her child. The baby who had given her strength when she had none. The baby she still hadn't named. Back in the city, Ethan's phone buzzed. The sanitation supervisor's voice came through, nervous but compliant. "There's one truck that matches the time and area. Unit 17, en route to the East Landfill. It's already past checkpoint 3. If your wife's in there, you don't have much time." Ethan didn't wait. He slammed the gear into drive and shot through the city like a man possessed. Red lights blurred past. Horns blared. None of it mattered. His car swerved dangerously, tires screeching as he took corners at full speed. He kept glancing at the live GPS his security team fed him. Unit 17 was on its final leg before the dump. 15 minutes. That's all he had. "Don't you dare give up, Ava," he muttered to himself, gripping the wheel tighter. "Hold on. I'm coming." The thought of her alone, afraid, calling for him, it tore at his chest like knives. He had failed her once. He wouldn't fail her again. 10 minutes. Then 5. The landfill came into view, the horizon smudged with dust and smoke. Far ahead, through a cloud of haze, he saw it, the truck. Unit 17. And it was backing up toward the compact zone. "No," Ethan breathed. "No, no, no." He slammed on the accelerator. The landfill loomed like a graveyard, its hills of rotting waste stretching into the smoky horizon. Seagulls circled overhead, shrieking into the morning sky as heavy machinery groaned and clanked below. Unit 17 reversed slowly toward the edge of the compactor pit, its rear panel lifting as the hydraulic arms prepared to release the load. The air was thick with the stench of decay, heat rising in waves from the endless sea of trash. Then, out of nowhere, a black Jeep tore across the gravel lot, tires screeching as it swerved past piles of debris. Ethan barely managed to stop the vehicle before it collided with the back of the truck. He jumped out, waving his arms frantically, shouting with every ounce of breath in his lungs. "Stop the truck! Shut it down! There's someone inside. The driver hit the brakes, confused and startled, as landfill workers began to gather. Alarms blared. The machinery screeched to a halt. Ethan sprinted toward the back, his heart hammering in his chest, hands trembling as he grabbed the edge of the truck's loading panel. "Get it open," he screamed. "Get it open now." One of the landfill supervisors, now fully alert, climbed up beside him and pried open the side panel. Ethan peered inside, eyes scanning the dark metal chamber, surrounded by garbage bags, broken glass, and compacted waste. For a moment, he feared the worst. That he was too late. That all that was left of her was silence. Then, he saw her. A soft whimper. Barely audible. A twitch of movement. "Ava!" he yelled, his voice cracking. She was wedged between a crumpled mattress and a pile of torn plastic, her body twisted unnaturally, her skin pale and bruised. Her hands were still bound, her face slick with sweat and grime. But her eyes fluttered weakly at the sound of his voice. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered, climbing in without hesitation. He tore the tape from her wrists and mouth with shaking fingers. "I'm here. I'm here now, sweetheart. I've got you." Ava blinked slowly, barely able to focus. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Ethan held her gently, cradling her head against his chest, pressing his forehead to hers as tears streamed down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered over and over. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. Please, stay with me. Don't let go." Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing to the back of the truck with stretchers and oxygen masks. They carefully lifted Ava from the heap, every motion delicate, precise. She moaned softly in pain, a hand instinctively moving to her belly. "She's pregnant," Ethan said desperately. "She needs help. Both of them do." The lead medic nodded. "We've got her. Keep talking to her. Don't let her slip." Ethan held her hand tightly as they moved her onto the stretcher, refusing to let go. His face was ghost white, his eyes filled with terror and love and regret all at once. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "You're strong. You're going to make it. I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not again." As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens roared to life, Ethan climbed in beside her, still holding her hand. He had nearly lost her. But now that she was back, broken, barely breathing, but alive, he would do whatever it took to make it right. The flashing red and blue lights lit up the front of Veronica's luxury apartment like a crime scene from a movie. She stood in the center of her living room, dressed in a silk robe, a glass of wine still in her hand when the knock came. Firm, commanding, undeniable. Her brows lifted in surprise, but she didn't flinch. Not until she opened the door and saw two officers standing there, badges raised. "Veronica Hart?" one of them asked. "Yes," she answered, her voice measured, eyes narrowing. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and attempted murder." She didn't have time to react. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. The officers cuffed her wrists behind her back as she sputtered. "Wait, what are you talking about? I don't, this is a mistake." But it wasn't. The evidence was overwhelming. Ethan had handed over everything, the footage from the neighbor's security camera, Ava's medical report, and most damning of all, the text messages on Veronica's phone. Messages Ethan had seen only after Ava was taken, when suspicion finally cracked his illusion of who Veronica really was. There were texts where she described Ava as a stain that needs removing, and another sent the night of the abduction. "It's done. She won't be a problem anymore. Now you're mine." The moment Veronica's name hit the press, her entire public image crumbled. The story was everywhere, Millionaire's mistress behind shocking abduction of pregnant wife. Her business partners dropped her overnight, clients vanished, and reporters camped outside the jailhouse, hungry for the fall of the woman who thought she was untouchable. But back in the hospital, there was no celebration. No satisfaction. Just silence. Ava lay in bed, her face pale, her lips cracked, hooked up to 4 fluids and monitors. Her baby's heartbeat echoed gently from the machine beside her, strong, steady, alive. She hadn't spoken in hours. Not to the nurses. Not to Ethan. Not even to herself. Her hands rested on her belly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if trying to escape into some version of the world where this had never happened. Ethan sat by her side, hunched forward, his face buried in his hands. The weight of guilt pressed down on him like a boulder. He had ignored her cries, believed lies, looked the other way while the woman who trusted him the most was nearly killed. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But I want you to know. I see everything now. And I swear, Ava, I'll never leave your side again. Not for a second." But Ava didn't look at him. Not in anger. Not in hate. She was just numb. Her entire focus was on one thing now. Staying alive, not for Ethan, not for what they once had, but for the child growing inside her. Her baby was her only anchor. And for now, that was enough. Ethan stood outside the hospital room with a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and a soft pink stuffed bear in the other. Through the narrow window in the door, he could see Ava cradling her belly, listening quietly as a therapist spoke beside her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She was just calm, present, focused. He'd learned that therapy was now a regular part of her day, that she was committed to healing in ways he hadn't even begun to understand. He left the flowers on the side table the next day. Then a handwritten letter the day after that. Then a custom crib made from hand-carved wood, the kind she once mentioned she loved in passing. But Ava never responded to any of it directly. Her silence wasn't bitter. It was just final. Still, she didn't push him away entirely. When the doctors confirmed the baby was safe and growing well, Ava allowed Ethan to attend the ultrasounds. She let him be there when the baby kicked for the first time, his eyes filling with tears as he reached toward her stomach. But every visit ended the same, Ethan trying to linger, hoping for a flicker of connection, and Ava quietly reminding him that their roles were now different. "You can be her father," she said once, without looking at him. "But not my husband." That line was a knife Ethan carried in his chest every day. The public fallout didn't help. News outlets ripped him apart for ignoring Ava's cries for help, for his relationship with Veronica, for everything he let spiral out of control. Business partners distanced themselves. His once polished image as a charismatic entrepreneur was replaced by headlines about betrayal and negligence. Invitations stopped coming. Clients disappeared. He walked through his mansion at night, cold, empty, and echoing, and wondered how he had ever thought Veronica's attention or ambition could replace the warmth Ava brought into his life. Now, all he had was time. Time to reflect. Time to ache. Time to watch Ava bloom into a stronger version of herself without him. And each day, he wrestled with one question: was there any redemption left? Or was he destined to live in the shadow of the woman he nearly lost? The woman who chose herself, and her child, over everything he had to offer? The early morning sun filtered gently through the sheer curtains of Ava's new home, a modest but warm cottage tucked at the edge of a peaceful neighborhood, where the air smelled of blooming jasmine and fresh beginnings. Inside, the walls were decorated with framed affirmations, soft pastel art, and hand-painted butterflies she'd made herself while nesting. Everything was hers. Not gifted, not inherited, earned. Piece by piece. Day by day. It had been months since the chaos. Months since hospital beeps, security details, court hearings, and tears in the dark. Ava had endured it all, and now, in her arms, was the reason she never gave up. Her daughter. Lila Grace. A tiny bundle of strength and light, wrapped in a soft peach blanket with a knitted cap covering tufts of dark hair. Her breath was steady, her hands curious, her eyes blinking up at her mother as if the world was brand new and full of promise. Ava rocked her gently in a white chair by the window. Outside, the garden she'd planted bloomed with wildflowers and lavender. She looked down at her daughter and smiled, not the polite kind she once gave for appearances, but a smile that started in her chest and warmed every part of her being. She had been broken, nearly destroyed, yet here she was. Not just alive, but living. Her days were full, not just with diaper changes and late-night feedings, but with purpose. She had joined a local women's rights group, first attending meetings quietly, then helping organize events, and eventually becoming a voice others leaned on. She shared her story not for pity, but for power. To remind women that survival wasn't weakness, and starting over wasn't failure, it was a revolution of the soul. Ethan visited Lila once a week, as part of their agreement. Ava kept it structured and respectful. She no longer cried when he left. She no longer waited for him to show up in some grand gesture. That chapter was closed. Today was different, though. Today was simply peaceful. As Lila drifted off to sleep, Ava stood and walked outside barefoot, stepping into the golden sunlight of the garden. She cradled her daughter close and turned her face toward the sky. The breeze caught her hair. The warmth kissed her skin. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she whispered 3 words aloud, not in desperation, but in gratitude. I am free. She was no longer someone's wife, someone's mistake, someone's tragedy. She was Ava, a mother, a fighter, and a woman who rose from the shadows with her child in her arms and the sun on her face. Finally strong. Finally safe. Finally home.